Hello everyone, good morning. This is Gopikrishna, working as an assistant professor, Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Adama Science and Technology University, Ethiopia. Currently I am working here. So I would like to give a brief demo about a database. What is database? What is database management system? So before we are going to learn about database management system, we must understand what is data, what is information. These are the most important terminology to learn, to know before we are going into database management system. So data is a raw facts and figures that is unprocessed. So that is the data. So a data, whatever recordable facts into the computer memory, mostly the recordable facts into the computer memory is called, actually it is called data. So what is information? So information is a processed data. It is coming from that raw facts. So this is the information. So information is nothing but an output. So data is nothing but an input, we can also say. So data, because it is unprocessed, once it is processed, then you will get some information about. So that information is actually outcome of that, from that raw data facts. So what is database? Now then let us come to know what is database. It is a collection of interrelated data, or also we can say a database is a collection of related data, and data is a collection of facts, just we have discussed about, and the figures that can be processed to produce the information. So mostly data represents recordable facts. So a database is a collection of interrelated raw facts and collection of data. Also we can say collection of interrelated data. That is what database. So database and DBMS. So to store, DBMS is a software which is used to store and organize the data in the computer. So, and not only store in such a way that it becomes easier to retrieve and manipulate and produce the information. So for that we are using DBMS softwares. So in olden days we are using file system formats, but now in traditional database management, in modern database management system, we are using a number of softwares to organize, to store the data, to retrieve the data, or to manage and produce the information. So why use a DBMS when there is a large amount of data, when there is a security and integrity of data are important. So and many users access the data concurrently. For this reason why we are using database management system. And this database, modern database has the following characters. We can see here the real world entity. So whatever the data we are storing, the realistic, and uses the real world entities to design its architecture. It uses the behavior and attributes too. For example, a school database may have the students as an entity and their age as an attribute. So like this, the real world, whatever employee, if you take employee number and employee age, so these are the attributes, real world entities we can. And the other characteristic is called relational database, relational based tables. So now most of the architectures are actually in the form of relational tables. So the total data, it is stored in the form of relation, so that a user can understand the architecture of data just by looking at the table names. And isolation of the data, and DBMS also provides, DBMS is actually stores metadata, and also it is a passive on which the database works and organizes. And redundancy in the sense, the DBMS follows the rules of normalization, which splits a relation when any one of the attribute is having redundancy in values. So normalization is mathematically rich and scientific, and this is the concept we are using while we are designing the database process that reduces the data redundancy. And consistency is the other characteristic. Consistency is the state and where the data and every relation in a database remains consistent when you are deleting, when you are updating, when you are inserting any data, if there is any failure occurs, the system failure occurs, immediately the database will goes to the prior state. Okay, a DBMS can provide a DBMS is provide a greater consistency as compared to earlier forms of the data storing application like a file processing system. And the other characteristic is query processing. Other processing is query processing characteristic. So the DBMS is equipped with query languages, which makes it more efficient to retrieve and manipulate whatever you want to delete or update or insert. For that we need a query language. This query language supports for the database, and ACID properties also. There is a atomicity, consistency, and isolation and durability. These concepts are applied to the transactions. When you are either all transactions or none of the transactions should be executed, always the database should be consistent, and always the database is isolated. Especially it will stay the database, this property will stay healthy in multi-transactional environment, and in case of failures, and multi-user concurrent. And also the database, this is the most important characteristic. The DBMS supports multiple users environment. It allows them to access and manipulate the data in parallel, and multiple views. So different users, DBMS offers multiple views for the different users. A user who is in the sales department, he can view, will have a different view of the database than the person who is looking with the production department. And the security is another characteristic. So this feature is multiple views of security to extend. DBMS will not provide all the rights to every user. So there are different security levels. So there are different, and it offers many different levels of security features, which enables multiple users to have a different views and with a data with a different features. So these are the important characteristics of the modern database management system. And let us see what are the users. So who are the users of this? There are three types of users. Okay, there are three types of users. So one is called end users and administrators and designers. So administrators, these are also called as a database administrators. So this database it maintains the DBMS, are responsible for administrating the database, and he is a DBA is plays a main role in any database management organization system. It maintains the isolation and force the security, and administration also will give DBMS resources like system license, required tools, and other things. So, and it also hardware maintenance related and software also maintain related. So many things he will be controlled. He is the main role in this. These are the administrator. So administrator is nothing but a DBA, we can call it as and also designers. So the designers are the group of the people which works on the design part of the database. So they keep a close watch on the which data it should be kept in which format. So these designers will take care of the design and architecture of how the data and relations and constraints and views and to put on the database and how to store. They will design the database. So they are called designers. They are the middle level layer. And end users, so finally the actual who reap the benefit of this having a database, so they are called end users. Can range from the simple viewers who pay attention to the logs of the market, or sophisticated users such as a business analysis. So these are the users. And let us come back to the architecture of this DBMS. Now earlier it was a one tier architecture. So that one tier architecture, DBMS only entity when the user directly sits on the database and use it. But next level, it's a two tier architecture. In between two tier architecture where they access the DBMS by means of an application. So here is an application tier is entirely independent of the database in terms of operation, so the design and the other programming. And now we are using in modern or DBMS system, three tier separates. It's a terms from each other based on the complexity of these users and how they use the data, and it must be widely used architecture to design a database. So one is a presentation tier and application tier and database tier. So in this database tier, We also have a relation that defines the data within constraints at this level. So all the data and physical level data and designing part level and application level, this is the application server to programs that access the database, and the presentation tier will view is nothing but the existence of the database around in beyond this layer. So this is the architecture, and there are so many data models are there. So before we are going to store any data in computers, in computer memory, so we must have a design, we must have because to avoid the redundancy, to efficient while you are making transactions like insertion and deletion and updation. So entity relation model ER model is based on the notation of the real world entities. So this is one of the oldest model, and still we are using in the designing of the database. And database model, ER model, creates an entity as well as a relationship and general attributes and constraints. So ER model is the best user concept design of a database. So in this we are using entities, relationships, entity and relationships. So here we can see there is a entity, this rectangle indicates the entity, and diamond symbol indicates the relation between these two entities and the attribute part. So the real world, the real entity is an ER model, the real world entity having this property called attributes. So every entity is having a set of attributes. Those attributes are actually called, every attribute is defined and its set of values called domains. So this is, and the relationships, what kind of relationships between we are maintaining, what kind of relationships. So there are many between two associations, between the two we can say it is entities in which ways the mapping cardinalities and define the number of association between two entities. So one to one and one to many, and many to one and one to many. These are the relations. Now let us see, other model is the most widely used model even now in the present database design, relational model. So relational model, it is some scientific model than others. There is based on the order, predicate logic, and defines a table with an array relations. So here it just looks like this table, and the table contains an entity, a table name, that is what the relation name, and every field in this table we can call it as a attribute, and every row in this it is called a tuple, and every column we can call it as a tuple table in the relational model. So the main highlights of this model is the data is stored in tables called relations. So relation can be normalized, and also in this relation they have an atomic values. So each row in this contains unique values. So this is and there are schema level. This is the other skeleton structure of this database management system, schema levels. So what is schema? A database schema is a skeleton structure that represents a logical view of the entire database. So this schema will tells how to design, who is the physical schema, what is the logical schema, what is the view schema, and so physical schema exactly where the database is pertains to actual storage of the data. It's a storage like a field indexes and other things, and logical schema which defines all logical constraints used to be applied on the database stored. So this is and in instance, what is database instance? It is an important, we distinguish these two individually. A database schema is a skeleton of the database, and which it is defined, the database does not exist at all. Once the database is operational, it is very difficult to make any changes to it. So a database does not contain any data or information. So a database instance is a state operational with data at any given time. It contains a snapshot of the database. So database instance tend to change with time. So database instance means every row and every entry in the database table, it is actually called an instance. Every instance or a state is a valid state. Every input is a valid state, diligently following all the validations and constraints and conditions that the database designers have to impose. So these are the these are the database instance. So thank you very much.